This is another way of relaxing to the max. That's why I always prefer the American word for toilets, which they call restrooms. Not toilet, not WC, but restroom. Because it gives you the opportunity to sit there. You sit there for half an hour and your boss says, "Where have you been?" "I've just been following instructions, it's restroom. So I've gone for a rest." Is that a good idea? Anyway, so for the topic of the talk this evening, I don't know why, honestly, I don't make this up, that I usually just invent or choose a subject at the beginning of the meditation. And we're telling a couple of jokes with our ops manager just beforehand about how to make all these beautiful suggestions to yourself and to others. May all beings be peace. Have you heard that one before? May all, instead of usually it's may all beings be peaceful. But change it to make it short, may all beings be peace. 2 types of food. Okay, anyway. So I thought, so we'll talk about beings and peace. Because I like the idea of peace, and it's just something which is the heart of all spiritual paths or religious paths which deserve to be called spiritual. They lead to peace, and you're able to understand what that peace really means. And so you can develop it. So, where do you feel peace in this life? There's a few times in the past I used to have to go to shopping centres, with one of the anigarikas to purchase like a flight ticket or to purchase something for the monastery. And it was so noisy. Sometimes you had to go to places to see like a parliamentarian in order to do a function like getting some recognition for Wesak, that's our Buddhist birthday. And all those times I've noticed many of the places where people live in this world and where you go and spend time are usually so noisy. So it's the sort of places you don't like to go. But then now and again you manage to go to places which are peaceful. Some time ago, I remember years ago, I upset this Catholic priest because he was giving me a lift from one place to another, and then we went along the ocean drive. It was in Bunbury. And he said, "What does the ocean tell you, Ajahn Brahm? How do you perceive the ocean?" And I said, "Noisy." Because the waves are noisy. And he said he thought they were peaceful. Then I started thinking deeper about what peace actually means. It's just like, sometimes if you go traveling overseas, just the quality of the air in Southeast Asia is very hot and smoky. And you land in Perth airport and it's fresh, clean and quiet. And then you go to, if you're lucky enough to go outside of the city and go to a place like Serpentine, the monastery in which I live, and it's very peaceful there. Even though there's many parrots squawking away. But then from the monastery, you go into like my hut, and I live in a cave. So, from the monastery, the forest, you go into a cave and it's even more peaceful. And then from my cave, you close your eyes, sit down and go into meditation, and it gets even more peaceful. It's like different stages of peacefulness. And in the meditation, as I hope we experienced, that you go into really deep states of peace. So what is that peace you're going into? Each place is less to disturb you, less disturbance. That's one of the reasons why, because I do travel a lot. Actually, I don't travel at all. I just get into the aircraft, sit down, close my eyes, and then when I'm asked to open my eyes again, you're in a different country. Well, I don't fly. It's the plane does the flying. I just do the sitting. So it's very comfortable. And so, for the peace, I notice that you can develop that peace anywhere because you see different stages of peacefulness with less and less and less disturbance. What disturbs you? It's one of the reasons why I teach people how to relax to the max. Because when you relax your body, then soon nothing disturbs you in the body. It's amazing, you're perfectly aware, you are still got your kindness, your awareness, but there's nothing which gives you any business to be done. And when there's no business to be done, you can feel that mindfulness and that peace living together and getting even more peaceful. So I know that sometimes people think, if you have so much peace, won't you fall asleep? And I did no way, because the peacefulness is so delightful. When you really start to enjoy peace and to see how powerful and how fascinating that is, of course you can never lose your mindfulness. Why is it that people go to places like forests and do what's called forest bathing, or you go down by the ocean where there's hardly anybody there? Oh, please excuse me for this story. I don't know if I told it last week or not, but it comes up. You know that when I was a young monk here in Australia, I volunteered to go teaching in prisons. And the prison which I went to teach meditation, the first one, was over in Bunbury. And the Bunbury prison only had a number of monks in it. It was a small prison at the time, of 100, 105 or something. And the first time I taught there, most people actually came to my class. And they came to my class, I found out why, when one of these guys, a really big guy, stood up, put his hand up and asked, "Is it okay to ask a question?" Now normally, not during the talk, I don't allow you to ask a question during the talk, but this man was really big. He had lots of scars and really big muscles. I was warned that he was a leader of one of the gangs inside the jail. When somebody like that asks you, "Can I ask a question?" the answer will always be, "Oh yes sir, please." And I'm being honest. And that's where he asked, "Ajahn Brahm, is it really true that through meditation you can learn how to levitate over walls?" So I understood why he asked me that question and why he'd come to learn meditation, just to escape from jail. And I always have to be honest. I said, yes, possible, but it takes a lot of hard work. And only after years and years of really great meditation, you may be able to do that. But, so they laughed. The next time I went there, instead of having a class of about 100 people, most of the prison, the next time I went there, only 3 prisoners turned up. So I realized why they came. But anyway, I was just saying that how hard it is to be peaceful or find a place of peace But one afternoon, when I was in Bunbury waiting to go to the prison in the evening, there was a very nice beach there. So I went to sit in meditation on the beach. And when I was sitting there on the beach, it was in November, and then I can get into really quiet meditations, being so peaceful that the outside world disappears. You're inside and enjoying yourself immensely. And then when I came out of that meditation, and usually those type of meditation those days, I'd usually sit for a couple of hours, not being disturbed, just sitting with the eyes closed, all the attention inside, just enjoying yourself, inside. And then when I opened my eyes, I think I did tell this story somewhere in the last week or two, but when I did open my eyes, then I got scared. You know why? I was sitting there alone on the beach that afternoon, but when I opened my eyes, I wasn't alone anymore. I saw there was lots of school kids were swimming in the ocean. And what really scared me at that time, I looked right next to me, there was someone sitting right next to me. And I took a look, and this was this young 17-year-old girl in a bikini with blonde hair. And on my right side, there was another 17-year-old brunette in a bikini. Now imagine if someone had taken a photograph of me like that and sent it to Thailand. How can you explain that? But it had a good explanation, because what had actually happened, the two girls told me about this. They said they just finished the year 12 exams, just pre-university entrance. And having just finished their exams for the year, basically finished school, they were off on the beach celebrating. The school was just the other side of the road along the beach. And they changed into their bathers, were about to go swimming and celebrating the end of the school year and beginning, they probably did well, of university next term. Then they saw this brown-robed, bald-headed guy sitting so still, like a statue on the beach. And they just wanted to know why. What was I doing? It's something they'd never seen before. And I was so peaceful, I had no idea of them sitting right next to me. And of course, when I opened my eyes, if you just come out of a nice meditation, deep meditation, you can't sort of laugh about and joke or anything. Even your speech is very soft. So I just said, what are you doing here? In a kind, polite way. And they told me what they were up to. They just wanted to find out, was this like a corpse sitting on the beach? What was it? And so I told them. I didn't need to say much, because I think I've already made that impression. The impression of actually seeing something, rather than just reading about it, or having it explained to you in words, is far more powerful. I always say that a picture, speaks much louder than words, but not just a picture like a photograph, a real being there, sitting so quiet and peaceful there. That really meant a lot to them. And so I thought, I don't really need to say too much. You're dressed in bikinis. It's not quite the best uniform, to speak with a monk when you're wearing a bikini. But anyway, that was just some of the experiences you have, and how you can be so peaceful and so still without having to worry about anything in the whole world. Imagine that. Imagine you don't have to worry, you don't have to be concerned, and you're resting in this present moment, really aware, you're at peace. And sometimes, that there was a time when Perth Airport, they wanted to get a meditation room there, like a place of peace. And when I went into there the first time, I said, what are they actually doing there? If you see anything suspicious, please call this number. Please know the flights and whatever is now leaving in 10 minutes' time. They have all these announcements. It wasn't a place of peace at all. And so sometimes you miss that. I often say to you, again, these stories, I say, I don't know when I last said them, but when I was still a lay person and was doing any work or any business in London, my place where my mother lived was a small apartment in a place called Acton, just on the edge of London. Actually, it was in the suburbs, but just not right in the middle. But you know one thing, I don't know if you know this, that I did notice only last year, that there was one person, he died recently, unfortunately. It's only because he died. That's where I heard that, he actually went to the same school as I did. Right? He's about 3 years ahead of me. And then from that school, he went to the same high school I did afterwards. And that was an actor who became very, very famous, who played Professor Snape in Harry Potter movies. So I saw Professor Snape, Alan Rickman his name was, before any of you did in the movies. But I often say that if you see a great actor like that, to be able to play this apparently very scary professor, they say he was scary. Was he scary? Do you know him? You seen those movies? Good. So anyway, to be a scary actor, you usually imagine one of your teachers when you were young, and you being able to base your character on him. So I know all the teachers of those two schools, the primary school and the high school, where Alan Rickman learned his O-levels and A-levels and everything else. So I was trying to think, which teacher was it? And I'm pretty sure it was his teacher over in the primary school, who everyone was scared of, because he was a disciplinarian. Mr. Jones, his name was. And he was a very scary teacher. But I still remember one of my experiences with Mr. Jones. My father, this is very worldly, but please excuse this. My father had the afternoon off work, and I went home for lunch. My father sort of saw me in, my mother's little apartment just close by, and my father said, "Oh, it's a shame you have to go to school this afternoon. I got these 2 tickets for a World Cup soccer match against Poland at Wembley Stadium." And he said, "Oh, it's a shame you have to go to school. You could have come with me to watch the match." Now you know what, in places like UK and even Poland, a soccer match is like. This is World Cup qualifying match. And so I said, "Oh, you never know. You can always ask." So I had the guts to go up to Mr. Jones and I asked him, "Please, sir, can I have the afternoon off school to watch a soccer match?" That's totally against the rules. But he told me, he said, "Well, you're doing okay. Off you go." He let me go. He let me break the school rules because I was doing well in the subject. And so sometimes, and I was also a kind, good kid. I never got into any trouble. And so because of that kindness and that lack of fear, I spent the afternoon watching a soccer match with the teacher's permission when I should have been in school. So anyway, that's what happens when you have wisdom and kindness even at a young age. But anyhow, that was not peaceful. Let's go back to the subject of how to be at peace. And how to be at peace is you let go of things. You're not worried about things. In my life I've seen dangerous things happen, but you've always managed to get around it. You know one of the scariest things which ever happened to me? I still remember it, and it was the most dangerous thing which ever happened to me. I was a student at Cambridge at this time, and one of the first time one of my friends got married, and so we all went to the wedding ceremony, and after the wedding ceremony was finished, my other friends were all well dressed in suits and very clean. And we were standing around, and the conversation started to turn to who's going to be next. And one of the other friends said, Jeff. He was one of my friends. He became a diplomat later on, the consul at Macau. And anyway, he said, Jeff will be next. And then the other guys were standing around said, nah, no one would marry Jeff. And then they looked at me. They said, he'll be next. And then my other friends, including Jeff, said, no one would marry him. And I kind of was happy with that statement. But what really scared me, when the lady standing next to me whispered into my ear, I would. That terrified me. In my whole life I've met snakes and tigers in the jungles and all sorts of other stuff. And I met sort of guys wanting to pick me up. But that was the most scariest thing. I'm being honest. One of the things I did when I was a monk, through the suburb of Acton, South Acton became like a very, very rough area. It's what the police would call a no-go area. And so one evening I was walking from my mother's apartment to the Sri Lankan temple in Chiswick, about half an hour, 45 minutes walk. And as I was walking there was a gang of hoodlums, 17, 18-year-olds, nothing else to do in the evening. And they were just gathering together for some friendship or, planning something, nothing else to do. And I was going to have to walk right past them. And as soon as they saw me, they recognized bald head, brown robe. I was a Buddhist monk. And they started chanting, Buddha, 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 going louder and louder, and all looking at me. There's about a dozen of them, trying to intimidate me. One thing I know, I refuse to be intimidated. So what I did, I could not lie. I could deceive a little bit. So I moved my hands up. In what I hoped they considered to be a kung fu pose. I knew absolutely nothing about kung fu. The only kung fu I knew is what I saw on TV in those days of a TV series, the Kung Fu. Not real at all, but nevertheless I watched it and I assumed a position. And they go, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. I never said anything. Silently, I walked right towards them. And as I walked towards them, these were hoodlums, big guys. They parted and let me through. That was a close call. But anyhow, those are the times where I did have a peaceful mind when I was doing this, not scared. I knew how to rest in peace, to be at peace, through the meditation I'd done. And that was how I used that peace in what was, a very dangerous situation. And so that's one of the reasons I know what peace is. I really respect it, worship it. And then nothing ever can hurt or harm you. It's a strange thing. One of the other times, even like here in Nolamara, I don't know when the last time I told this story, we had a big opening ceremony many years ago. When we first took over the ownership of this facility, I don't know if any of you may remember, but this used to be an Anglican church, and the reception area was where the priest lived. You remember that, Dennis? And anyway, so we had a big ceremony to open it, and then we invited the governor, and that was Sir Gordon Reed. Got his name right? But anyway, he was the governor. And I was surprised that he accepted. We're only a small organisation. So we had a big ceremony here. Ajahn Brahm was the abbot then. And he invited me, to make sure that we get some nice tents and chairs. And it doesn't matter how much we spend, make sure we make a good impression. This was basically the first big Buddhist facility we had here in Australia, before we even had a monastery yet, any monastery. So when I ordered the chairs and the marquees, and I told, this was a hire company over in, I think, Netherlands somewhere, a posh one. I said, we've got the governor of Western Australia coming in a couple of days. We need the very best. And the lady who was the owner of the company said, no trouble. But when they came, the tents were filthy, with lots of red dust. And the chairs were filthy. But I did not mind that, we can always wash them. But what was the trouble was the chairs for the VIPs, about a dozen of them. Not one of those chairs, not one, had legs the same length. They all wobbled. And we were having the governor of Western Australia coming. And so, oh crikey, I got on the telephone late on a Friday afternoon or evening, and where all the workers had gone? They'd gone to their office, which was a local pub, starting their weekend drinking. And then I told the owner of the organisation that we do need to get these chairs changed. We've got the governor coming. What if he falls off his chair with his wife? That'd be great in the newspapers the following morning. And then she said, oh, it must be some big mistake, we'll get them changed. And so it's not that far away on a Friday afternoon. It's actually a Saturday afternoon. Well, I forget which. But anyway, the truck came around the corner into Nansen Way with new chairs. And it was only halfway down that road, still travelling, I don't know, about 20 kilometres an hour, 25. And one of these guys jumped out. And he had his fist clenched. And he said, where's the bloke in charge? I'm looking for the bloke in charge. So what did I do? Of course, I went right up to him and said, I am the bloke in charge of the tents and stuff. And he put his fist right in front of my nose. And all the people who were here, not one of them helped. Not one of them. You've been in those situations before, you're really in a difficult situation. They just would look. What's going to happen next? But that was wonderful, because I was at peace, still enough. That guy couldn't do anything. He had his fist in front of my nose for about a couple of minutes, and he couldn't punch. He couldn't remove his fist away. Later on, when I contemplated what had happened, I don't know if I'm using the right words, but even violence needs a kind of foreplay. It's usually, if it's two guys get angry at each other, say, you shouldn't have done it, but I would mean to do that. And then they have an argument before the actual violence starts. You can't just do violence cold. And I wasn't playing that usual foreplay. He's waiting for me to say something. Yeah, you and who else? And who else? Because I didn't play that, I realized, I'm again being honest, I remember this very clearly. I had him locked down in front of me, he couldn't move. And I was enjoying that little bit of power without violence. He couldn't punch, he couldn't walk backwards. And then in that 2 or 3 minutes, the lorry, the truck parked, and the real boss came out and said, come on, let's unload the chairs. I said, yeah, I'll help you. There's no violence at all. But that was one of the times, because these guys had just been coming out of the pub to change chairs for the Buddhists. And he was right in front of my face. That's the most alcohol I'd ever breathed in my whole life as a monk. You could smell it, just so strong. Anyhow, that's wonderful ways of making sure, because of peace, that which disturbs peace cannot arise. Even animals can't do any harm to you, simply because you're too much at peace to actually to get even the animals into a mood of defensiveness. I kind of love this power of peace. But more than the power, just the joy of it, the happiness of it. When you are at peace, I said, last Tuesday, I did my annual talk at the Solaris Cancer Support Centre. I usually go there once a year. And the reason I go there once a year, you were at that last Tuesday, at the back, sitting against the wall, and one of the people who were staying over in Bodhinyana Monastery. And one of the reasons why they want to hear and practice the meditation, because it works. It's weird. That peace, which you can develop in meditation, kind of stops the cancer from being aggressive. That's how I can look at it. Makes everything go peaceful. When it goes peaceful, the cancer just doesn't get worse and even disappears. Still remember the Cockney gentleman who came over to our Bodhinyana Monastery many years ago, and he spoke such thick Cockney accent. The other monks at the time who were living in Bodhinyana Monastery had to invite me to translate for them. Poor old George had such thick Cockney, I was the only one who could understand him. And anyway, he came because he had got lung cancer because of too much smoking. And he told me what happened just at the last part of the journey with cancer. He went to his doctor over in Armadale, and the doctor told him that on the result of the latest X-ray at that time, the lungs were inoperable. The cancer was spread too far. And the doctor had told him, we can do chemotherapy and radiation therapy. That's only going to extend your life by about 2 or 3 months at the best. But we'll do that for you if you want it. And George said, I'll just go home and talk to my wife, see what she says. And he came back 1 week later, and the doctor insisted on doing another X-ray to see how the cancer had progressed. And when he went into the doctor's room, the doctor was looking at the new X-ray, and the doctor was shaking his head. And poor old George, he understood the shaking of the head meant it had got worse. So he asked the doctor, it's got worse, hasn't it? It's got worse. And then the doctor looked up from the X-ray and said, George, it hasn't got worse. It's disappeared. What the heck have you been doing? And George answered in his own words, meditation. And doctor said, carry on. This is just one example of many. And George would often visit Bodhinyana monastery regularly. You'd often see him, but that was so many years ago. I haven't seen him for a long time now, so I think he has died of old age. He was pretty old at the time anyway. So how come that degree of peace and kindness can assist you in such difficult situations as a cancer? How many times, even when I was teaching in Vietnam just over a couple of weeks ago, even there, honestly, many of the women there and the men, they came up to me and said, Ajahn Brahm, you saved my life. And they meant it. They had cancers, and they'd gone online or listened on the books, and their cancers had vanished. People who were having a lot of difficulty. I'll never forget the time just walking through Paddington Station, changing trains, and this Afro-English girl came running up towards me. And when she came towards me, she looked at me and said, you're the YouTube monk, aren't you? She called me YouTube monk. Because what had happened to her, she'd been going through a really, really difficult separation. And she was suicidal. And where she lived over in UK, there was plenty of psychologists, plenty of doctors to try and help her. But nothing worked for her. And she was desperate. So she was of that age of people who go online. When she went online, she was just browsing, and she came across one of my talks, a YouTube talk by a Buddhist monk. And it was an hour long. She listened to all of it. She liked it that much. She saw what other talks I'd given. She binged on Ajahn Brahm YouTube talks. And she said, that got me through the depression, she said. And she said, you saved my life. And when people say things like that, you can see she meant it. And it's beautiful to see that even recently in South Vietnam, many people said that. What that means is I don't take pride in that. Instead I take what a beautiful service it is to be able to teach people how to overcome the pain of a separation. not to look at it as a personal fault, but to look at it as something which can be healed, mostly through stillness. How can you be still when you've gone through all this terrible, terrible trauma? Even like a cancer threatening your life, when even the doctor says you've only got sort of 3 weeks to live. Have you come across people like that? Been told they've only got 3 weeks to live? And this, one guy said, "It's only 3 weeks. I don't think I can pay your bills within 3 weeks. Okay, I'll give you 5 weeks." No, that's only a joke. But how people say, "Okay, no more therapy. I'm just going to relax." And they're still alive afterwards. Months and years later. It's one of my favourite monks, one of the ones who really inspired me. His name was Ajahn Brahm. He had cancer, terminal cancer, in Sirirat Hospital over in Bangkok when I first went to Thailand, being looked after at the expense of the King of Thailand. And nothing was working. So he decided to go back to his monastery and die there. He did die about 25 years later, full remission. That's what Ajahn Brahm. I kind of love those stories, because there's another way of dealing with the problems of life. When you have really deep peace, inside the mind, and that spreads out to the body, relaxes the body, because you have a very, very peaceful mind. And that's the best way to deal with health. So if you see even me becoming old and sick, there's another way of dealing with any sickness in the body, not just sending a car to pick me up on the arms round. There's other ways to deal with this, and that's during the peace of the meditation. And it's also so incredibly pleasant therapy. So many therapies you have are painful, or they're disturbing, and you have to go to a hospital, and you have to sit there. I must admit, when I did have my cough, many, many kind people would give me all sorts of medicines. And I learned how to say no a long time ago. Because once, I forget what sickness I had, but everybody was coming up to me and said, "Ajahn Brahm, you should take this, it's really good for you, it cured me." And I'd say, "Okay." And out of kindness, you went to all that problem getting this medicine or medication. Somebody else would come up and say, "No, try this is even better." And someone else would come up and say, "No, try this." Somebody else would come. And I agreed to taking so much medication that really made me sick. That's one of the reasons why I just let the body learn how to look after itself. And that's what I always do. The best medication is stillness. Be still. Really still. And then you can get in touch with your own inner power. That's one time I mentioned, I think, to you, that sometimes you get to know people of other religions. Because I was brought up in a Christian country, it's one of the quotes which I always remember from the Christian Bible. I'm going to quote Christian Bible scripture now. Is that okay? Are you going to sort of chuck me out afterwards? And there was this beautiful phrase in the Psalms, "Be still and know that thou art God." It's a really amazing little saying. I don't know how that got there. You're not God, but be still and know the bliss and beauty and power inside of you. That's where you understand how other religions work and how powerful that stillness is. how you can't be harmed or hurt. And I really mean that. There's one guy, I mentioned this earlier I think, or in another talk, there's one guy over in Sri Lanka who has very good skill in his meditation, so much so that his teacher, who's a doctor, medical doctor, got a TV team to go and look at him while he was meditating. While he was meditating, the doctor just pulled up his shirt to reveal his arm, not anesthetized it, but just anesthetized, make sure that no infection can happen, put on some alcohol on his arm, so to make it sterile. Got out a scalpel and tried to make an incision on this guy's arm. And he really put some pressure on, you could see that, and it was filmed for TV. And the scalpel would not go in. He couldn't cut him. And then, after he came out of meditation, the doctor asked him again, "This is what I did, I didn't warn you, I'm sorry about that. Can I do it again?" And the guy said, "Yeah, okay." They trusted each other. So they went into a deep meditation again. And the doctor just then made an incision in this guy's arm. This time, the scalpel went in. And a little bit of blood came out. The doctor sewed up the wound, put a bandage on it. And when the guy came out of meditation, he hadn't felt a thing. Afterwards he could feel, his arm was a bit sore. But that's actually what happens with stillness. Nothing can harm you. I know this monk once, when he got into one of these really still meditations, the lay people who were watching him thought he was dead. He wasn't dead. He came out of meditation afterwards, just going into a deep meditation, that's all. A beautiful, beautiful stillness. So this is actually how the stillness works. There's nothing to call it stillness because nothing is moving. Nothing can disturb you. Nothing can take you out of that stillness until eventually the karma of that stillness fades away and then you can move again. And that is blissful. That's the bliss of stillness. One of the highest happinesses. And afterwards, this is the other thing, after you come out of any degree of stillness, your mind is so powerful. If you need to pass exams, the easiest thing in the world. It's not because you know the answers, because your brain does not wander. Your brain is very precise. And you can answer those questions so easily. Has that ever happened to any of you? You're doing a puzzle. I know what I do on a Saturday morning. On Arms Round, somebody gives me a West Australian crossword puzzles. And they have things like the cryptic crossword. And the cryptic crossword, sometimes I'm tired. I put that aside, meditate a bit, and then I answer it afterwards. Like last week, one of those questions was, in the cryptic crossword, blooming motor race. Those 3 words. And the answer was carnation. It was blooming, a carnation is a flower. Motor car race, nation. So those are the sorts of things, seeing things in a weird way. How can you do that? Because you meditate and become still. The brain can see things in so many different ways, easily. That's one of the reasons why that stillness can enhance your intelligence. even actually so deeply, you get insights into what the Buddha taught. Not ordinary insights, but the deep, powerful ones. Through the power of stillness. Okay, thank you for listening. Sometimes I always want not just to talk, but to be of assistance to people. So sometimes if I see like someone like Eddie, working or something, I always ask him if he wants a hand. And I'm always willing to give him a hand. Okay. So anyway, thank you all for listening. Are there any questions? Oh, that's very nice. Jana? Excellent. Very good. Thank you for doing that. Can I give you a hand? Very good. Okay. From Sri Lanka, dear Ajahn Brahm, if life and events are not self, are not in our control, what is the role of effort and intention on the path? Who makes effort if there's no controller? Great! When you really get into the deep parts of the path, there is no effort. That's a wonderful part of it. It just happens naturally. All the effort ever does is actually disturb the path. There comes a time, instead of effort, you let go. That's why in the deep parts of the path, Ajahn Chah's famous simile, he told me that his monastery was a mango orchard planted by the Buddha. Totally false, but it was a simile. He said the only way to get those mangoes is to sit perfectly still under the mango tree, and pull out your hand, and the mango will fall into it. That's what he said many times. Ridiculous, I thought, but so true. If you want to get a deep meditation, or you want to get enlightened, just sit down very still, hold out the hand of compassion, and all the fruits will fall in. Second from Germany, being severely ill, my biggest fear is that my loved one and I get separated. Can I make sure that we continue together in our next lives too? Love is strong. If your love is strong and you're a good person, you made lots of good karma, that can sometimes work. And there's many stories of that. As a Buddhist monk, he loved the stories of rebirth. Just like, I remember, where's he gone, Dennis? Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, you were there when I last spoke, now you've vanished. But anyway, Dennis told me this story because he used to do hypnotherapy. And he was very good at it. He was a very trustworthy, very kind man. And anyway, he told me another story of he heard in one of the conferences on hypnotherapy. This hypnotist in Sydney had this young girl who was anorexic. And she was so severely anorexic that she was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. No one was able to help. Maybe if you can find out some reason, some cause of that anorexia from a previous life, maybe that could help. But because she was so young, you had to have her mother in the room together with the hypnotist. And when the hypnotist started regressing her into a previous life, she recorded that in her previous life she was the youngest of two sisters. They both fell in love with the same guy, and the elder sister was more attractive, and so the guy married the elder sister, and the younger sister was so depressed she committed suicide. And as the younger sister under hypnosis was telling that story, the mother listening almost was going ballistic, was really upset. So this poor hypnotist had two people in extreme mental disorder in his room. So he calmed the mother down first. Why are you crying so much? And that's when the mother confessed, I was that sister, the elder sister. I never told my daughter this, that before she was born, my sister was so depressed because she also loved the guy which I married. And she was so depressed, she killed herself. It's not the sort of thing you tell, your other daughter. And that's why she's trying so hard to be thin, because she thought that would make her more attractive. Dennis, you can shake your head, was that true? Good enough. That's one of my favourite words, good enough. And so if you want to live together in your next life, just if you really make that determination, and your wife also wants to live with you in the next life, then there's a good chance. Question from Poland. How to focus on well-being, peacemaking, kindfulness, when my body gives me stress, bad thoughts, fear out of physiological issues? Your body does not give you fear or bad thoughts or stress. It gives you the opportunity to have that stress. And you've got used to doing that. It's just how the mind reacts to the body. It doesn't have to do it that way. That's why many people come to a Buddhist center like this, and they learn how, even if they have bad feelings in their body, they don't follow them. They can still find peace. One of the ways they don't find peace is just when they don't know how to live in the present moment. Or even the past. You've had a lot of pain in the past. That creates that illusion of the present will be the same. You learn the language of fear and pain. But if you totally let go of the past, then you can be free. The past is not conditioning the present. And as for the future, there's so many things in my life, in my own life, and in the life of others which I've noticed. They should be dead, but they're not. They should be in extreme pain, and they're not. They should even not be here, but they are here. You see in those kind of ways, all those expectations which I have about pain and health, sometimes are wrong. The expectations are wrong. Lastly, from Bolivia, even though no justice satisfies ill will, how can someone use the reflection of karma in a way that is helpful for his development of metta without increasing his ill will? That's why sometimes I use that simile. If you have ill will, please, like shit which you step into, and take it home and dig it under your mango tree instead of throwing it at other people, and you get better mangoes. So you've been hurt by somebody or something. And because you've been hurt, you have the opportunity to use it to grow good qualities. So the karma is not used to develop more bad karma, but used to develop more understanding, compassion. Whoever did what which really harmed or hurt in such a terrible, terrible way, you learn from that. So you never become a person who creates that to anybody else. And I learned that, as I've told you before, from my father. When I asked him about his father, my paternal grandfather, my father did not want to talk about him. He called him a bastard. I'm talking about my own grandfather. And it was because he was a drunkard, and he would come home from the pub, take off his belt and whip anybody for no reason whatsoever. He was a violent drunkard. And he said, many times my father was on the end of that belt. And he said, that didn't hurt as much as seeing his father, my grandfather, start whipping his wife, my grandmother. He said he couldn't protect her. And that really, really, really upset him. And then he said to me, he made a vow, if ever I survive this childhood, and if ever I get married and have kids, I will never hit them. And he couldn't. So my brother and I, sometimes we'd have a fight or argue, make loud noises, and he'd come into the room with a slipper, but he couldn't ever hit us. He just put the slipper away. Even though he never hit us, we understood him. And he was a guy who said, son, however you turn out in life, the door of my house will always be open to you. And later on, I realized that unconditional love, the door of my heart will always be open to you. That's why I loved him so much. He'd gone through hell. He'd learned. He was such a beautiful man afterwards. Anyway, so that's the answer, the best I can give to that question. So.
Ajahn Brahm, can I say?
Yeah,
Ajahn Brahm, yeah. Thanks for the really, really wonderful deep talk on peace, It's very important for us of all. Ajahn Brahm, the Buddha was telling us that peace lies within, not without, He's asking to look inside yeah. See, as a human being, Ajahn Brahm, there are problems that come to us, isn't it? The problems come us to disturb our peace, Okay, yeah. And then, so you're saying it, counter this is stillness, what you're saying, stillness?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Also, stillness, also the other thing is the mind, mind. Ajahn Brahm, how our mind, we train our mind, how to respond to the problems, isn't it?
Yeah. If you try to get your body to be perfectly still, you won't be breathing. Your heart won't move. So you can't do that. But your mind can be still. You don't think, you stay in this moment, you don't go off into the future, you don't start thinking what's going to happen. All those times, just when, walking through those band of hobos in South Acton, all those times when I had stones thrown at me, I wasn't afraid, because I stayed in the present moment. It's amazing that you go into difficult situations and there's no fear. Honestly, nothing there. Because you're in this moment. Fear exists in the future. It's not a theory. Try it.
So apart from the stillness, which is said Ajahn Brahm, we can also use the tools which the Buddha gave us, like the 8 winds. He says, do not be moved by the 8 winds, profit, loss, praise, blame, all these things. And also equanimity, the 7 highest of factors of enlightenment, highest equanimity, and highest jhana too is equanimity too, things.
Oh, yeah.
We can use all this,
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Until you're like a rock. You're so still. Nothing moves you.
Maybe we should have a little workshop or what for practice, no.
More workshop. We can have a workshop.
Yeah, we have to practice.
Peace.
It needs practice,
Really deep peace. And then I'll just leave you in here.
Because it's a suffering world we live in.
Yes, but it's a suffering world. But honestly, that's why we're monks and we have nuns. You get so peaceful, you enjoy life. Even when everything else is falling apart. You can be so still and peaceful that there's no pain.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Going. Okay, so now I'll bow to the Buddha statue. And when I bow, I usually bow to 3 things. To virtue is the first. The third thing is kindness, compassion. And the second thing is peace. That's how much I respect it. I worship peace, value it so highly, like virtue and kindness. And thank you all for listening. Arahato Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamman Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. So they bow to you now.